Hi there, I'm Stephanie Erickson, your host on today's episode of Why We Are Christians. Today we're interviewing Sebastian D'Souza. Welcome, Sebastian, glad to have you here.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yay.
Glad to be here.
Thanks. Well, we're excited to have your story unfold before our very eyes. Let's start at the very beginning.
Okay.
Where were you born? Africa. Where's your family from?
My family's from India.
How did your family get from India to Africa?
Well, back then the passport was the British passport was good to be because both were under British rule, India and that part of Africa. And so we were able to, my parents went there for opportunities for employment.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So, and what did your dad do?
He worked for Barclay's bank.
Oh.
And my mother worked for a British motor company.
Oh, okay.
As a secretary.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Do you have siblings?
I do.
How many?
I had 3 older brothers, but one drowned in one of the lakes in Africa during a field trip.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's a tragedy.
It is. And he was 16 years old.
Oh, wow. Oh, that must have been really tough for you.
A tragic time.
Oh, that's too bad.
Right.
Sorry to hear that. So how long did you live in Africa before you moved to the United States from Africa, right?
Yeah, my family was there for 15 years. And then built up, that's where we lived. I was born there, my brothers. And so what happened is we ended up having to leave because of a military coup that took place with Edi Amin.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I still remember being in the watching a parade with my brother, and Edi Amin was in one of the parades going down with saluting, and everybody was cheering him because he was like a hero. But we didn't know, it was not too long after that that he made a move and he took over the country.
And so he told foreigners that they had to leave?
Especially, yeah, he told Indians that they had to leave if you're of Indian descent. And so we had to leave, and I still remember leaving the city of Kampala while his military and his tanks were rolling in. And as they were rolling in, we were just quietly leaving, getting out of the country.
Wow.
So yeah, it was an interesting time. And my mother said, I still remember, she said, do not point at the soldiers or they will shoot at us.
Oh my gosh.
So I still remember that. I was scared.
You must have been really afraid,
Yeah.
really scared.
So
Did you take a lot of your possessions with you, or did you have to
we
kind of leave quickly?
Yeah, we had to leave quickly, and the life savings of my parents was in the bank, and they promised they would send it, but they never got it.
Oh, wow.
And so we left quickly. We didn't have much, so but by then we just had a place to go to in India, while my dad had come to America looking for work. And so we were waiting in India for about 8 months before he could petition and we could come to America.
Wow, so do you have family that you stayed with in India?
Yes, my grandmother.
Okay. Okay, so then where did he come to in America? San Francisco?
He first came into New York, and then it was so cold in New York, he was freezing in New York. And he met another person from India, and they both decided, let's get on the bus and go to California. And they got on the Greyhound bus, and they came to California.
Settled in San Francisco?
We did.
Your family did?
Yes.
In the city of San Francisco?
In the city, in the downtown Tenderloin.
Oh,
And
wow.
I grew up watching Bonanza with Big Valley and the Ponderosa, and I was dreaming of riding horses to school, and I was thinking I would have a pony and all of that, and it really captured my imagination. I thought that was America, but we ended up in downtown Tenderloin in San Francisco with the high rises and the congestion and the traffic and all of the other things there.
So were your parents religious?
They were. We would go to church every Sunday.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, and even though we didn't have a car, the whole family would get together and walk, because eventually we moved out of the Tenderloin and we moved into the outer mission of San Francisco, which is the Portola area, and we had to walk about 4 miles to church.
Wow.
Even though we didn't have a car, we would walk. And eventually my dad bought a car, and so we would drive to church. But we were very religious in that way. we would always go to church on Sunday for Mass. And that was our one obligation, because my mom said, you have to give at least 1 hour to God.
1 hour a week to God.
1 hour a week to God.
Okay.
And that was very clear. And sometimes we would also try to kneel and do the rosary. But because I have two brothers and myself and my dad were kind of not willing participants, so we would start giggling and laughing, and finally my mother canceled the rosary, which is really like for those who don't know, if you don't know it, it's praying through the rosary beads,
Right.
and each bead represents a certain prayer.
Oh, okay.
And you're supposed to say it several times.
Oh.
And then part of it is also saying what we call the Lord's Prayer.
Right.
And you say it several times as well.
So that would take quite a while, right?
It takes about an hour.
Okay, and that would be something you would do at home?
Yes,
Okay.
kneeling.
Right, okay.
And then pretty soon my brothers and I would get the giggles, and she would call
Yeah.
it off.
She would probably get kind
Even
of
my
upset
dad
with
was
you.
not very, very happy with that, but my mother tried very hard.
She tried.
Yes.
Okay, I get it. Yeah, this is frustrating for moms when they try those kind of things. So
Yeah.
you went to church, a Catholic church,
Yes.
every Sunday, and
Sunday.
would you say you believed in God?
I did believe in God, and I had this, I would pray, and there are prayers that you memorize and you say it before you go to sleep. And I would do that before every night before I go to sleep. I had these certain prayers that I would do, and they were basically memorized prayers. I believed that God was real, but very distant. I didn't have a sense of who He was, and I had a hunger to know that. And I was hoping that I would learn that when I had what they call catechism.
Mm-hmm.
And I missed catechism as a youngster, so I was already in high school. So when I went to high school with catechism, unfortunately, all they did is they showed us videos of which is a right decision and wrong decision. Should Johnny have done this, or should he have not done this? Basically moral lessons. And they never talked about the Bible during my catechism. That's for me personally what happened. And so that desire to know the Bible was sort of gone by the wayside. And eventually I had to try to read it on my own. So I got a Bible, and my mom actually encouraged me to read the Bible to her while she was cooking. So I would read parts of the Bible, but I don't remember what part I was reading. And it just seemed like a bunch of stories to me.
Mm-hmm. It didn't really resonate.
No.
So you understood that there was a God,
Yes.
and you say you believed in Him,
Mm-hmm.
but you really didn't know anything about Him.
Right.
So
It's
it was
about God, but I didn't necessarily walk in that on a daily basis. I think I got into that religious mentality where I would just do my service on Sunday, and I would compartmentalize God for the Sunday, for that morning or that afternoon or that Saturday night for the evening, because we would sometimes also go on Saturday.
So for that hour
For
per
that
week.
hour, it was all I was expecting to give to God.
Right.
And I think that concept is what kept me, in a sense, in the dark.
Right, right. And there was no encouragement to understand God, really.
Right.
It sounds like it was more of a legalism type thing of
That's true.
there's a God, and you have to do right and wrong, and you kind of earn your way that way. If you're good, you're in. If you're bad, you're not.
Yeah, and there's a sense in which you do just enough, to please God enough, is to just go to church on Sunday, and you've pretty much done your part.
Right.
And if you do anything more or take it any further, it may be perceived as fanaticism.
Oh,
Because I did, again, I revived my interest in the Bible during high school and my first year in college. And the first question that came to me was like, are you trying to be a priest? Because there was a little bit of a anxiety to see a young man reading the Bible, because it might result in that maybe I will lose my my direction and become a religious weirdo or something like that.
fanatic.
A fanatic,
Right.
right?
Interesting. So in a way, it was sort of played down for you
Yes.
to just sort of stay in the
Keep a
in the mold
yes.
and not get out of that.
Keep it in a moderation.
In a box.
God is good in moderation, is what I was thinking. You know,
Wow.
I was learning.
That's interesting.
Not too much, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Just do what's expected, and that'll be it. Okay, that's interesting. So, you had mentioned that you were a little afraid at some point in your life that if you did take God too seriously, then He would call you to be a missionary in Africa.
Right.
So, what was that fear about? Did you
Yeah.
have a bad taste about Africa?
I felt that the concept was if you get too serious with God, then He will ask you to sacrifice so much that you will end up in the most difficult country in the world. Which to me at that time, even though I was born there, I felt like the idea or that fallacy that was circulating around was basically that you end up in Africa. You know, in a very tough place.
Well, and you had that huge scare. I mean, you were a little boy, and so that Africa meant danger to you, right? Probably. So that kind
one
of
scare did not really affect me that much. It was just for that moment.
Okay.
But the thing that I do remember about Africa, because Uganda, I remember it was beautiful. I remember the weather was really nice, and everything that we needed was there. In fact, it was actually, I lived in an Indian community, and then the only Africans that we saw were people that were helping us. And so that's also one reason why maybe there was a backlash with the Indians there, because they controlled so much. They controlled too many businesses and so forth, which is that was the perception anyway. And so we had our, you know, lots of great stores, lots of beautiful activities to do, like flying kites on the roof, and it was just a wonderful place.
Okay.
The life that I had there was really great.
So
growing
your
up.
fear of being called as a missionary to Africa was just being called to do something that you really didn't
Really
want
hard.
to do,
Yeah.
and something really hard.
Yeah,
and
probably not that
terrible.
part of Africa. Yeah,
Yeah,
probably
like-
some really poor part.
like
or
God
whatever.
was sort of be like punishing you. Okay, if you want to do what I want you to do, then do this nasty thing over here.
It was more of like, this is what real Christianity is.
Oh, right.
So I wanted to kind of be careful about that.
Right, right. And joy and love and all that was really not a part of that deal, right?
Yeah, I didn't think it would be.
Right.
But the ironic thing is that's where I wanted to do later on.
Right, that is pretty ironic, and we'll get there.
Okay.
So tell me a little bit about your first contact with Jesus.
All right. So I started listening to reggae music, okay? And reggae music mentions a lot about the Bible.
Oh, really? Oh.
And so they talk about chanting a psalm a day. There's a group called Steel Pulse. And then I said, wait a minute, there's a psalms in the Bible. And so I asked my mom, I said, isn't there where's our Bible? And this is when I started to revive my interest in the Bible. And she said, look under my bed. And sure enough, it was under her bed with the shoes in the shoe boxes. It literally had dust covered all over it, just like, you know,
This is-
stereotypical.
Right.
And so I found it there, and I looked, and sure enough, boom, there's the Psalms. So I said, oh, this is what the songs and the music is about.
Oh.
And so I started reading those, and it really started to speak to me. You know, I started to find meaning and valuable ideas and thoughts in the Psalms, and I think it's from there that I started to encounter God, the true God, you know, of the Bible. And I met a guy in my PE class, my first year in college. We were jogging, and he said, Sebastian, why don't we get together sometime? Come to my church this Sunday. I said, well, how about let's go for the movie or something like that. But then he said, we'll pick you up at 10:30. So he learned this method of basically like in sales, you don't listen to objections. You just keep on moving on until they say no 3 times. So I was a pushover, I guess, because after the second time, I said, either he didn't hear me or whatever, but never mind. Okay, I'll be ready at 10:30. So I went, and that's my first encounter, because I told my mom, I'm going to Protestant church. go in there, everybody has a Bible, they're listening to the message, and so I felt like, wow, this is more what I was thinking church should be like, because I had this feeling of frustration when I would go and see in the Catholic church that I was part of, and the people would just basically ignore whatever's being said from there up front, and basically checking in and checking out as soon as the service is over. But here people knew each other, they hugged each other, they had relationships with one another, and also the pastor was speaking directly from the Bible, which is something I was hoping for a long time ago, when I was younger. And so then that very day, that day I went forward, and once again my friend didn't listen to me. He said, "Do you want to go forward?" I said, No. I was thinking to myself, I'm not going to just go forward on the first day. This is my first day here. And I knew that meant go forward in order to commit your life to Christ. And then he said again, he ignored me, and he says, they'll tell you about being born again. And I thought, that's one thing. I'm a good person, but I don't know if I'm born again. So I went forward, and this guy named Philip, he counseled me in what they call inquiry room, part of our church in the back. They would take you aside and talk to you, very basically break down the gospel for you. And Philip did such a wonderful job, kindly, gently explaining the details of the gospel. And so I was able, at that point, it kind of came together, what I learned as a kid, and the cross, and how I can be saved. That became clear to me at that point. And so I said, yes, I do want to pray.
Well,
to be born again.
Let me just interrupt you, because this is interesting. You went to church for the first time, and there must have been a lot of, phrases and things that they were saying that you weren't familiar with, right? So that is really interesting, that there was something that was drawing you to go forward, because most people would just say no to their friend. So I want to explore that a little bit, and then the other thing I wanted to talk about a little bit was backing up to when you told your mom you were going to a Protestant church. What was her reaction to that?
She was like, oh, what church is this? Because back in those days, this is about 1983, not too very, very close to that time, there was a cult called the People's Temple.
Oh, right.
And Jim Jones and all of that. And there was some ideas that, there's dangerous. My mom, at first, she reluctantly let me go, because I said they're going to pick me up at 10:30.
How old were you? You were in college,
I
was
18.
Okay.
18, almost 19 years old.
Okay, got it. All right, so she was just afraid because of the things that she had heard. That makes sense.
And she has no experience with it.
Right,
so this,
right.
As we grew up traditional Catholics, we don't have experience of just visiting this church and that church.
Right, because isn't it sort of forbidden for Catholics to go to a Protestant church?
The old school Catholics, I feel that I've encountered, they have this teaching that if you go into a Protestant church, it's some sort of a sin, not a full grade. And pray God forgive you for that. But I didn't have that training or teaching.
Okay.
When I went to catechism, all they said is it right to steal or not right to steal? So I had that kind of training, and I thought, this is common sense. Why do I need to be a Catholic? Everybody knows this. And so I kind of put God I almost wrote God off and the Christianity, because I was thinking, this is just common sense.
It's just simplistic.
Yeah,
it's
do right and don't do wrong.
Right.
But
although it's good teaching.
It's good.
But yeah, I hear what you're saying.
But I felt like, is that all there is? And that's why I started to actually get into the New Age movement, reading books on visualization, transcendental meditation. And so the autobiography of a yogi was a popular book back then, so I read all about him, and so I got into that. So
like realm.
Searching for sure.
For meaning.
Yes.
Because it didn't seem like God was really providing a lot of meaning at
One thing
that
that struck me really is I looked at my brother, 7 years older than me, and I looked up to him, and he was in business and making a lot of money. And when he decided to quit, he was in real estate. Even though he was making money, he said, I'm going to go back to college. And I thought to myself, if money is not the answer, then what is? So I thought to myself, money didn't make him happy. So it probably won't make me happy. Things that they do in that business. And so I thought, okay, well, he was just about to buy Mercedes-Benz, and I was all excited about that. He was making good money. So when he expressed that it was not worth it, I thought to myself, this was a crisis for me, because what is worth it then?
So that's a really unique quality, that you could look at someone older and learn from them and their experience.
Yes.
So you were deeply thinking and taking this in. That's
But
great.
unfortunately, when I did become a Christian, he was very much against it.
Well, let's talk a little bit about, okay, so let's go back to the story of, you did go forward, you learned searching, and so all of a sudden now you hear about Jesus and a personal relationship with Jesus, and what Jesus did for us, died for us in our place, took our punishment, right? I'm speaking a little bit for you now, so
that's right.
So talk a little bit about that experience.
What happened is, once I was excited, I felt joyful, I felt like I had found what I was looking for, and that is true meaning and true peace and true hope, because Christ is risen, and his word, as I was reading it, it's just resonating with me. Everything that he says is just like, oh my goodness, you know, this is perfect and pure and right. One time, my brother asked, tell me clearly, just tell me, what exactly is this about? And I said to him, well, okay, Christ died on the cross for our sins, died for my sins. And he looked at my mom and he says, he's lost his mind. We've been hearing about this all along as we grew up, but now what's different? You know, so to him, it was almost as if, didn't you know? I mean, this is
like,
what
is
what we've been told all along, and now you're telling me this, and you're going crazy over this. So it's almost like we were inoculated, but somehow I still, you know, you had enough of it so that you don't really it doesn't impact you, but it got me 100%, and so I couldn't move past that, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
So what were some of the things that you felt, you know, especially convicted of at that point?
The conviction that I felt that I could only find God through Christ, because the books that I was reading, Autobiography of a Yogi and so forth, the New Age, they talked about how you have to go through multiple lifetimes of reincarnations and births and rebirths in order to reach this point of enlightenment. And it just seemed that the more I tried also in myself to improve myself, the more I realized how much I needed to be improved, how weak I was to change. Even small things like using bad language. When I tried to stop using bad language, that's when I felt like I wanted to use it even more so. So when I heard about Christ saying, and that the story is that you are a sinner, you're not God, and you don't have any divine nature, you need Christ who is divine, and he's the one who he will take away your sin, he will save you from this, and when you trust him, he will allow you to reach that point of enlightenment or whatever you're seeking, but it's all what he does for you, not what you do. And so that convicted me very much. There's a verse in the Bible that says that it is by grace you have been saved through faith, not of works. It is a gift of God so that no one can boast. That verse stuck out to me because I had grown up believing that it was, if I was to be accepted by God, it would require me to do good things and not do the bad things. And somehow I believed that heaven was only going to happen, and I didn't really care about heaven that much. I just wanted to live for the here and now at that point. So, but when I started to read these New Age books, I realized I'm so far from, the perfection that I need. And so I got convicted that Christ is the one that makes me perfect. And the Bible does teach that it is his righteousness, not ours, that allows us to be accepted to God.
Right.
Before God.
That's really great. I love it
Yeah.
that you quoted that verse, because we do get confused sometimes and think that it is about works.
Right.
And while we are Christians and we are following Christ and Christ lives in us, we do want to do good works, but that's not salvation.
Right. Our passion for God and our love for God is what leads us to obedience. Jesus said,
Right.
if you love me, you will obey me. And you fall in love with him as you learn what he did for you.
Yes.
And so you obey him out of that,
Right.
not so much out of trying to earn his acceptance.
Right.
Because who would ever be able to earn God's perfection? Because he expects perfection, and only Christ is perfect. So what he did for us on the cross allows us to experience that sense of being accepted from God, even though we're imperfect. And that also creates in us a desire to change, and by his Holy Spirit in us, we can change. And so I noticed—
Only by his Holy Spirit.
Yes, and that's what
Yes.
happened. I experienced Christ changing my mind, the way I think. And I found myself asking myself, how do I know this is real? Will this fade away like my love for reggae? I like it, but I don't love it like I used to. I used to like rock. Will that fade away like that? Because I don't really like heavy metal anymore. I'd like it. Oh, it's okay. But I was thinking, will this fade away? But it, the thing is that it didn't.
It's getting stronger.
It's getting
Right.
stronger.
This is really great, Sebastian. Thank you. We are going to wrap it up right
Okay.
now and go on, but we will be back for
All right.
our second segment with Sebastian D'Souza, so please make sure you tune in for our next program. I'm Stephanie Erickson, and thank you for watching Why We Are Christians.